Stop, don't pan there. Those words saved a miner from death in 1849 and revealed a secret that changed gold mining forever. While thousands of miners fought over the same crowded riverbanks, a small group of prospectors was quietly getting rich somewhere else. They discovered a method so effective, mining companies still use its core principles today. But here's what's fascinating. It wasn't about better tools or harder work. Most documentaries and history books portray the gold rush way too general. There are incredible stories from this time, and today we are diving into one of them. Your journey as one of the most successful men in history begins now. Before we begin, make sure to tell us where you're listening from. I always love to see how history connects us from all around the world. The water hits your knees like 1,000 ice needles, and you're already questioning everything. Your breath comes in sharp puffs in the dawn air, and the weight of the metal pan feels impossibly heavy in your numb fingers. Around you, the sounds of other men, coughing, cursing, the splash of water against rock, blend into a symphony of desperation. You've been here 3 days, and your pan has shown nothing but black sand and broken dreams. This is California, 1849. You're one of the 49ers, that's what they're calling the fortune seekers, who've rushed here from every corner of the world. The name comes from the year, but it might as well describe your chances. 49-1 against finding anything that'll keep you alive past winter. As the sun climbs higher over the Sierra Nevada, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold that mock your empty pan, you begin to understand that desperation alone won't fill your pockets. You crouch beside the American River, watching the water flow past your boots, its current whispering secrets you can't yet understand, where it's been, what it's carrying, what it's left behind. Other miners work frantically around you, their pans catching nothing but hopes, and the occasional glint that turns out to be worthless mica, fool's gold they call it. But you're starting to notice something different. The old Mexican prospector downstream, Jose, he calls himself, moves with a different rhythm. His weathered hands don't fight the water, they work with it. You watch him select his spot, not randomly, but with purpose. He's looking for something specific, and you strain to hear his muttered Spanish over the gurgle of the creek. Color, he says, catching your stare. His English is broken, but his meaning is clear when he opens his palm. 3 tiny flakes of gold, no bigger than pinheads, gleam against his dark skin. Color means gold, no color, no gold. Color, that's what they call any trace of gold, even flakes so small they barely catch the light. But it's hope made visible, proof that larger nuggets might be waiting upstream. The smell of wood smoke drifts from the mining camp behind you, mixing with the metallic scent of wet rock and the sharp bite of mountain air. Your stomach growls, reminding you of the dwindling supplies in your tent. Flour costs more than gold some days, and men are dying of scurvy faster than they're striking it rich. You study the riverbank with new eyes, beginning to see what Jose sees. The water cuts different patterns, fast here, slow there, creating eddies and pools where heavy material might settle. Jose works the inside bend of the river, where the current slows and drops its burden. The gravel looks different there, darker, more compact. This is placer mining, not digging deep shafts, but sifting gold from the river gravel, like panning for treasure that nature has already done half the work of separating. Driven by this new understanding, you move upstream, testing the principle. The first pan yields nothing but sand, and your own reflection staring back from the muddy water. But you're learning to read the land now, to see what Jose sees. The creek bed tells a story written in stone and sediment. Here, where a fallen log has redirected the current for months, maybe years. The water swirls, slows, drops whatever it's carrying. You fill your pan carefully, letting the rhythm of the water guide your hands. Shake, swirl, let the lighter material wash away. The black sand at the bottom grows heavier with each gentle motion. And then you see it. A flash of metal, different from the dull glimmer of mica. Real color. Your heart hammers against your ribs, but you force yourself to stay calm, to keep the gentle swirling motion that separates gold from everything else. The flake is tiny, smaller than your fingernail, but it's real. The technique becomes meditation over the following days. Fill the pan with gravel from the right spot, inside bends, behind obstacles, anywhere the current slows. Add water, shake to break up clay, let the heavy materials settle. Gentle circular motions, tilting the pan, letting water and light materials flow away. The gold, being heavier, sinks to the bottom with the black sand. It's patient work, repetitive work, but each pan teaches you something new about how water moves, how gold behaves, how the earth gives up its secrets to those who learn to listen. But success in the goldfields brings its own dangers. After 2 weeks of steady work, of pulling color from the gravel with increasing skill, you notice 3 men walking down from the camp. They're not carrying pans or shovels, they're carrying guns, and they're heading straight for your spot. The metallic taste of fear coats your tongue as you stare down the barrel of a Colt revolver. It's 3 against 1, and the afternoon sun glints off the gunmetal like a promise of violence. Your productive claim, the spot where you've been pulling color from the gravel, suddenly feels like a death trap. You deaf boy. The leader's voice carries the flat accent of Missouri, and his eyes hold the kind of emptiness that comes from too many hard winters and too few scruples. This here's our claim now. You pocket the tiny flakes, your first real gold, and stand slowly. Your claim isn't marked with more than a few stones, and a stick with your name carved into it. Out here, that's supposed to be enough. Supposed to be enough. Supposed to be enough. Supposed to be. The leader of the 3 men spits tobacco juice that splatters near your feet. This here's our claim now, boy. You best find yourself another spot. Your hands shake, but not from the cold anymore. Around you, the sounds of the mining camp continue. The ring of pickaxes, the splash of water, the distant laughter of men who haven't yet learned that fortune and misfortune are separated by nothing more than the width of a gun barrel. This is claim jumping, stealing someone's mining spot through force or trickery, and it's about to teach you a lesson about frontier justice. You've heard the stories around the campfires, claims taken at gunpoint, bodies found floating in the American River, men who simply disappeared when they struck it rich. The law is 200 miles away in Sacramento, and even there, it's barely more than a few overworked officials trying to manage a territory that's growing faster than they can count. But you've also learned something else in these mountains. You've watched Jose, the Mexican prospector, work the same claim for months without trouble, not because he's the fastest draw, but because he's earned respect. Men nod when he passes. They ask his opinion about new claims. They trust his word in disputes. The secret isn't in the gun you've borrowed from another miner, its weight unfamiliar against your hip. It's in understanding the social dynamics of this lawless place. These men aren't just claim jumpers, they're testing you. Word has spread that you've been finding color consistently, and now they want to see if you'll fight for it or fold like so many others. You take a slow breath, tasting the dust and wood smoke that hangs in the mountain air. Your heart hammers, but you force your voice to stay level. Gentlemen, I understand your interest in this claim, but I filed it properly with the Miners Committee, and I've been working it fair and square. The leader laughs, but you notice the other 2 shift uncomfortably. Good, you're not just talking to them, you're talking to the dozen miners who've stopped their work to watch. This is theater now, and reputation is the currency that matters most. Filing papers don't mean nothing out here, the leader snarls. Possession is the only law that counts. But you've learned something about possession. It's not just about who holds the ground, it's about who the community believes deserves to hold it. You've been fair with your neighbors, shared information about promising spots, helped newcomers understand the basics of placer mining. That goodwill is about to be tested. You're right about possession, you say, and your voice carries further than you intended. But it's not just about holding ground, it's about holding respect. You gesture to the watching miners. These men have seen me work this claim honest. They've seen me share what I've learned. They know I'm not some greenhorn who'll run at the first sign of trouble. The psychology of dangerous men is simpler than you'd expected. Bullies thrive on fear and isolation. But this leader is realizing he's not facing a terrified newcomer alone. He's facing a community that's starting to take sides. Old Pete, a grizzled prospector from the next claim over, spits into the dirt. Now that you mention it, Jake, I ain't seen you boys do much honest work lately. Seems like you're always looking to take what other folks have found. More murmurs of agreement ripple through the crowd. You're learning tactical psychology, reading the room, understanding that most conflicts are decided before the first shot is fired. Halt! The leader's eyes flick nervously to his companions, then to the growing crowd of miners. In mining camps like this one, justice flows through informal networks. There's usually a miners' court, a rough democracy, where disputes are settled by vote rather than violence. The Vigilance Committee handles serious crimes, but most conflicts are resolved through community pressure and shared agreements about what's fair. Men who consistently take more than they give find themselves isolated, their claims mysteriously jumpingable, their supplies hard to purchase. The social fabric might be thin, but it's stronger than individual greed when the community decides to enforce its own rules. The gunshot echoes off the canyon walls, and for a heart-stopping moment, you think you're dead. But it's Jose who fired into the air, his ancient rifle smoking in his weathered hands. "Enough," he says, his voice carrying absolute authority. "This boy, he works honest. He shares knowledge. He helps others. These men," he gestures dismissively at the three claim jumpers. "They take, they don't give. Community decides." The leader's face goes red, but he's outnumbered now, and he knows it. "This ain't over," he mutters, but he's already backing away, his companions following. The crowd begins to disperse, but not before several miners nod at you with new respect. Jose walks over, his rifle still cradled in his arms. "You did good, boy. You understand now, gold makes men desperate, but respect keeps you alive." Your hands finally stop shaking, and you realize you've just learned something more valuable than any nugget you'll pull from the gravel. In a place where law travels slower than greed, survival depends on building alliances and earning the kind of reputation that makes others willing to stand with you. The sun is setting over the Sierra Nevada, painting the sky in shades of gold that would make any prospector's heart race. You've learned that frontier justice isn't about the fastest gun or the strongest arm. It's about understanding the social networks that hold communities together, even in the most lawless places. But as you return to your work, you can't shake the feeling that you've only won the first round. The leader's parting words echo in your mind, and you realize that success in the goldfields brings its own dangers. The more color you find, the more attention you'll attract. And some of that attention will come from men who won't be deterred by community pressure or social justice. Over the following weeks, as your reputation for honest work spreads and your daily yield of gold steadily increases, you begin to understand that individual success has its limits. The water continues its ancient whisper around your boots, carrying tales of fortune and failure, but now you hear something new in its voice, the sound of opportunity beyond simple prospecting. The revelation comes with the dawn, but not in the way you expect. The thunder starts at dawn, but there's not a cloud in the sky. It's the sound of water, thousands of gallons per minute, being forced through canvas hoses and iron nozzles with enough pressure to strip bark from trees. The ground beneath your feet vibrates with each pulse of the hydraulic mining operation that's sprung up just upstream from your claim. You watch from your modest spot by the river, your hand-panning operation suddenly looking as primitive as a child's toy. In the month since you faced down the claim jumpers, you've been pulling steady color from the gravel, but the men upstream are processing more dirt in an hour than you can sift in a week. Their water cannons blast entire hillsides apart, washing tons of gold-bearing gravel through enormous sluices, long wooden channels that separate gold from debris like a gigantic version of your pan. The message is clear: scale up or get left behind. Standing there in the morning mist, watching the industrial transformation of gold mining unfold before your eyes, you realize that the individual prospector's era is ending. You study the hydraulic operation with the intensity of a general surveying enemy fortifications. The setup is brilliant in its simplicity and terrifying in its power. Canvas hoses snake up the mountainside like enormous serpents, carrying water from dammed streams hundreds of feet above. The pressure builds as the water descends, until it explodes from iron nozzles with the force of artillery. The spray of mud and rocks fills the air with a mist that catches the morning sun like a rainbow made of destruction. Trees that have stood for decades are reduced to splinters in minutes. The ground itself disappears into a slurry of water, gravel and gold that flows into massive wooden sluices lined with mercury and rough boards that catch the heavy particles. But you're not just watching the destruction, you're studying the engineering. The water wheels that power the pumps, the careful angle of the sluices, the placement of the nozzles for maximum effectiveness. This is mechanical engineering applied to mining, and it's revolutionizing the entire industry. The problem is obvious: this equipment costs more than most miners will see in a lifetime. The men running this operation aren't lone prospectors. They're backed by San Francisco capital, investors who understand that the real money in the gold rush isn't in individual claims, but in industrial-scale operations. You feel the weight of your small success pressing down on you. Your hand-panning yields are steady but limited. There's only so much gravel one man can process in a day, only so much of the river bottom you can work before the easy pickings are gone. To compete, you need to multiply your productivity by orders of magnitude. That evening, As the hydraulic operations shut down for the night and relative quiet returns to the canyon, you walk the creek bed with new eyes, not looking for gold but for engineering opportunities. The stream that feeds your claim drops 30 feet through a series of natural terraces, gravity just waiting to be harnessed. You've learned to read the land for gold, now you need to read it for mechanical advantage. You start small, with salvaged lumber and borrowed tools. A simple water wheel, no bigger than a wagon wheel, positioned where the stream drops over a ledge. The current catches the wooden paddles, turning the wheel with steady, patient power. It's not the thunderous force of the hydraulic operations, but it's yours, and it's working. The wheel powers a crude pump that lifts water to a higher elevation, creating pressure for a modest sluice system. You position carefully designed channels to direct the flow, maximizing the washing action that separates gold from gravel. It's the same principle as the massive operations upstream, but scaled to your resources and refined to your specific claim. The sound changes everything. Instead of the quiet splash of your pan, your claim now hums with the steady rhythm of mechanical efficiency. The water wheel creaks and turns, the pump chugs with clockwork regularity, and the sluice gurgles with the sound of gold being separated from everything else. The technical setup requires constant adjustment and maintenance. Water flow varies with the season and weather. The wooden sluice boards need to be positioned at precisely the right angle. Too steep and the gold washes away with everything else. Too shallow, and the heavy material doesn't move at all. Mercury, when you can afford it, helps catch the finest particles, but it's expensive and dangerous. Most miners rely on riffles, wooden slats that create turbulence and slow the water just enough for gold to settle while lighter material flows away. The entire system is a delicate balance of physics, hydraulics, and engineering intuition developed through trial and error. For weeks, your modest mechanical operation runs smoothly, yielding more gold than you ever imagined possible with hand panning. You begin to think you've found the perfect balance between individual enterprise and industrial efficiency. But the mountains have their own plans, and they're about to teach you a lesson about the interconnectedness of all mining operations in the canyon. Then the mountain gave way. The rumble starts upstream, different from the usual thunder of the hydraulic operations. This is deeper, more ominous, the sound of tons of loosened earth suddenly deciding to obey gravity. You look up to see a wall of mud and debris racing down the canyon, carrying away trees, boulders, and everything else in its path. Your water wheel disappears first, snapped like a twig. The carefully constructed sluice channels are buried under tons of mining debris from the hydraulic operation upstream. In seconds, weeks of work vanish beneath the industrial waste of your larger competitors. But as you stand in the aftermath, knee-deep in mud and surveying the destruction, you realize something crucial. The hydraulic operation that caused this disaster has also exposed entirely new deposits of gold-bearing gravel. The flood has stripped away topsoil and revealed bedrock that's been hidden for centuries. More importantly, you've learned that the real competition isn't between individual miners, it's between different approaches to extracting wealth from the earth. The big hydraulic operations are powerful, but they're also vulnerable. They require enormous capital investment, complex logistics, and they generate environmental destruction that's starting to anger downstream communities. Standing in the wreckage of your mechanical dreams, watching the sunset paint the devastated canyon in shades of gold and shadow, you realize that your journey from prospector to engineer has taught you something more valuable than any technological skill. You've gone from prospector to engineer in just 6 months, learning to harness water power and mechanical advantage. But the destruction of your equipment has taught you something more valuable. Technological adaptation separates temporary success from sustainable advantage, but technology alone isn't enough. The real opportunity lies not in competing with the industrial operations, but in understanding their weaknesses. They're so focused on massive extraction that they're ignoring the broader economic system that makes their operations possible. They need supplies, equipment, transportation, and financing, all services that a smaller, more agile operation could provide. As you plan your next move, you're no longer thinking like a miner, you're thinking like an entrepreneur, and your sights are set not on the gold in the ground, but on the gold in the pockets of everyone trying to get it out. The musty smell of flour sacks hits your nostrils as you step into Morrison's warehouse. 20,000 pounds of wheat flour, stacked floor to ceiling in the dim candlelight. Your fingers trace the rough burlap, feeling for moisture damage that could ruin an entire investment. But something's wrong. The warehouse is too quiet. No workers loading wagons, No merchants haggling over prices, just the distant sound of your own breathing and the creak of settling grain sacks. "Ship's 3 weeks overdue," Morrison whispers, his voice tight with worry. "The Golden Gate was supposed to dock yesterday with supplies from back east." You nod, but your mind is already racing. 3 weeks overdue doesn't just mean delayed cargo. It means every merchant in San Francisco is about to realize what you figured out 2 days ago. The city is about to run out of food. The scratching of your quill against paper fills the silence as you calculate. Flour sells for $6 a barrel today. If the ship doesn't arrive by week's end, desperate bakers will pay 15, maybe 20. The math is simple, but the stakes make your hands shake slightly as you sign the purchase order. This is speculation, betting on future prices, like a high-stakes poker game, where the cards are ships, weather, and human desperation. 6 months ago you were sifting gold from creek beds. Now you're learning that the real treasure isn't what you dig from the ground, but what you can predict about what other people will need. The warehouse door bangs open, and you hear the heavy footsteps of 3 men approaching. Their voices carry the confident tone of established merchants who've controlled San Francisco's supply chains since before the gold rush began. Well, comes a gravelly voice you recognize as Big Jim Patterson, the man who owns half the warehouses in the city. "Look what we have here." The mining boy thinks he can play with the big men. You turn slowly, letting your eyes adjust to see their faces in the flickering light. Patterson's got 2 men flanking him, the kind who solve business disputes with fists rather than contracts. But you notice something they probably don't expect. Your hand rests casually near the loaded pistol you've carried since your mining days. Frontier justice taught you that respect comes from being prepared, not from being afraid. "Just conducting business, gentlemen," you say, your voice steady despite your racing heart. "Morrison here has flour to sell, and I have gold to spend." Big Jim's laugh echoes off the warehouse walls. "See, that's your problem, boy. You think this is about buying and selling, but supply trading is about information. And information is what separates the smart money from the broke dreamers." He's right, and you know it. These men have connections you don't. Captains who send word about delayed ships, dock workers who whisper about damaged cargo, government officials who know about policy changes before they're announced. Information asymmetry, they call it back east. The difference between what you know and what everyone else knows creates the greatest opportunities for wealth creation. But you've learned something these established merchants haven't considered. Gold mining taught you to read patterns that others miss. The same instinct that helped you find color in creek beds now helps you spot the subtle signs of supply chain disruption. "Funny thing about information," you say, pulling a folded telegram from your pocket. "Sometimes it comes from unexpected places." The warehouse falls silent except for the distant sound of seagulls calling from the harbor. You unfold the paper slowly, letting them see the official telegraph company seal. "Stage driver from Sacramento mentioned seeing ship wreckage washed up near Point Reyes 2 days ago. Took me 12 hours of riding to reach the telegraph office and confirm it." You pause, watching their faces change as they understand what you're telling them. The Golden Gate isn't coming. Ever. Morrison's face goes pale. Big Jim's confident smile fades. The sound of your own heartbeat fills your ears as you realize you've just shifted the entire power balance in this room. "That means," you continue, your voice growing stronger, "every barrel of flour in this warehouse just became worth its weight in silver, and I just bought it all." The silence stretches for what feels like minutes, but must be only seconds. Then Big Jim nods slowly, the gesture of a man who recognizes when he's been outplayed. "Well played, mining boy. Well played." As their footsteps fade outside, you stand alone among the flour sacks that represent your first real fortune. The musty smell now carries the sweet scent of opportunity. You've discovered that fortunes are made not in gold but in what gold miners need. But the ship that was supposed to arrive never came, and that telegram in your pocket is about to make you the richest man in San Francisco. In 3 months, you'd learned that information was more valuable than gold, and sometimes the most valuable information was what other people didn't know they needed to know. The success of your flour speculation opened doors that had been closed to you before. Word of your triumph spread through San Francisco's merchant circles, and suddenly the men who had dismissed you as a mining boy were seeking your advice on their own ventures. But with greater success came greater risks, and you soon discovered that making enemies of powerful men required a different kind of protection than what a loaded pistol could provide. The evening fog rolled in from the bay, as you made your way through the narrow streets toward Murphy's saloon, your boots echoing against the wooden sidewalks, still damp from the afternoon rain. The saloon's warm glow spilled out onto the street, and through the windows you could see the usual crowd of miners, merchants, and drifters drowning their troubles in whiskey and cards. But tonight, you weren't here for gambling or drinking. Tonight, you were here for a different kind of business entirely. The sheriff's badge gleams in the lamplight as he speaks, his voice barely above a whisper in the smoke-filled back room of Murphy's saloon. New mining law comes up for vote next week. Word is, it'll require all claims to be re-registered with the territorial government. You lean back in the creaking wooden chair, the whiskey burning your throat as you process what Judge Harrison just told you. Around the table, 4 other men sit in the golden circle of lamplight, the real power brokers of California territory. The scratching of someone's pen on paper mingles with the distant sound of piano music from the main saloon. Re-registration fees, you ask, though you already know the answer will determine whether your mining investments survive the next month. $50 per claim, the judge replies, his weathered face serious, plus annual renewal fees, plus new environmental restrictions on hydraulic mining. The rustle of legal documents fills the silence as each man calculates what this means for his business. You've learned that politics is just another form of mining, but the gold is power, and the tools are relationships, favors, and information. 6 months ago, you thought business was about having the best product at the best price, but your success with supply trading taught you a harder lesson. Competitors don't just compete with better services, they use political connections to change the rules of the game entirely. Gentlemen, you say, setting down your glass with deliberate care, I believe we have a problem that affects all of us. The room's attention focuses on you. These men control California's emerging power structure, territorial officials, federal judges, land commissioners, and the handful of businessmen wealthy enough to influence policy. But they're also the ones who can protect your investments, or destroy them with a single vote. My hydraulic mining operations employ 200 men, you continue. Those men spend their wages with local merchants who pay taxes to fund territorial administration. Shut down hydraulic mining, and you shut down the economy that funds this entire political system. Judge Harrison nods slowly. What do you propose? This is the moment you've been building toward. Political networking isn't just about making friends. It's about creating mutual dependencies that make your success essential to other people's survival. I propose we draft an alternative bill, one that protects legitimate mining operations while addressing environmental concerns. I'll fund the legal research and lobbying effort. In exchange, I want assurance that my business interests receive proper consideration in future territorial decisions. The clink of whiskey glasses sealing agreements echoes around the table, but you notice something in their faces, the recognition that you've just shifted from being someone who asks for favors to someone who provides them. Sheriff McKenna leans forward, his voice carrying the authority of someone who's survived 3 years of frontier law enforcement. There's something else you need to know. Big Jim Patterson's been talking to federal commissioners about establishing a territorial board of trade. He wants to control all supply contracts for government operations. Your blood runs cold. Patterson, the warehouse owner who tried to intimidate you months ago, is attempting regulatory capture. He's not just trying to outcompete you, he's trying to use government power to eliminate competition entirely. A board of trade sounds reasonable, you say carefully, assuming it includes representatives from all major commercial interests. The sound of papers rustling fills the room as Judge Harrison pulls out a document, already drafted. Patterson's organization would have exclusive authority to approve all supply contracts over $500, plus the right to inspect competitor operations for quality assurance. The political machine is revealing itself. In emerging markets like California territory, the real competition isn't between businesses, it's between different groups trying to control the regulatory system itself. Gentlemen, you say, standing and walking to the window where you can see the lights of San Francisco's growing business district, I believe we need to think bigger than just mining laws. You turn back to face them, the lamplight casting long shadows across the room. Patterson wants to control supply contracts, but what if we controlled the entire territorial commercial code? What if we drafted comprehensive business regulations that protect legitimate operators while preventing monopolistic practices? The silence that follows is different from before. These men are realizing that you're not just seeking protection for your existing interests, you're proposing to help them build the entire political and economic structure of California's future. That's ambitious, Sheriff McKenna says, but his tone suggests interest rather than skepticism. Ambitious, yes, but necessary. You pull out your own document, a detailed analysis of territorial tax revenues generated by different types of business operations. I've been studying the numbers. Traditional mining claims generate about $2 per acre in annual tax revenue, but integrated operations, mining, transportation, supply trading, generate $20 per acre. The scratching of quill pens begins again, as they examine your calculations. You've learned that in politics, numbers matter more than arguments. Show people how supporting your interests makes them money, and they'll find ways to justify any decision. Judge Harrison looks up from the papers. You're proposing to make yourself indispensable to the territorial government. I'm proposing to make productive business indispensable to territorial government, you correct, which happens to include my operations. The political machinery is clicking into place. Without political protection, all your mining and supply trading investments could be legislated away by connected rivals. But with the right relationships, you don't just get protection, you get the power to shape the rules that govern everyone else. Politics, you realize as you shake hands with each man around the table, is just another form of mining, but the gold is power, and the richest veins are found in the back rooms where the real decisions get made. You'd learned that in emerging markets, regulatory capture and relationship building determine long-term success. The game wasn't just about making money, it was about making sure you could keep it. The political connections you cultivated in Murphy's Saloon proved invaluable over the following months. The territorial commercial code you helped draft not only protected your mining operations, but also positioned you to expand into new ventures. As California's economy grew, you began to see opportunities beyond mining and supply trading, opportunities that would require a different kind of strategic thinking altogether. The spring of 1851 brought unprecedented growth to the territory. Thousands of new miners arrived each month, and with them came an ever-increasing demand for the infrastructure that could move goods and people across the rugged landscape. You watched wagon trains struggle through mountain passes, observed the bottlenecks that slowed commerce, and gradually realized that the greatest fortunes would belong not to those who produced goods, but to those who controlled how those goods moved from place to place. It was during a particularly difficult supply run to your mining operations that the idea first crystallized. Your wagons had been delayed 3 days waiting to cross Devil's Canyon, where a rickety rope bridge could handle only one wagon at a time. As you stood on the canyon rim watching the endless line of freight wagons stretching back toward the valley, you understood that geography itself was the ultimate monopoly, and the man who controlled the choke points could control everything else. The creaking of heavily loaded wagons echoes through the mountain pass as you count the 6th freight train of the morning, 24 wagons, each carrying 2 tons of supplies from Sacramento to the mining camps, each wagon paying your toll of $5 to cross the bridge you built over Devil's Canyon. You stand on the wooden platform above the toll booth, watching the steady stream of commerce flow beneath your feet. The morning air carries the smell of dust, sweat, and the distant sound of pickaxes from mining operations that depend entirely on this single mountain pass to receive their supplies. $120 already today, calls out Tom Riley, your toll collector, as he waves another wagon train through. And it's not even noon yet. But you're not thinking about today's profits. You're studying the patterns that most people miss, the rhythm of commerce that reveals where the real choke points exist. Every business in the Sierra Nevada depends on goods flowing through just 3 mountain passes. Every pound of flour, every pickaxe, every letter from home follows the same narrow paths carved by geography and necessity. This is what you've learned about strategic positioning. Real wealth comes from controlling essential systems, not just participating in them. The sound of hoofbeats approaches from the east, and you recognize the distinctive gait of Charlie Morrison's horse. He's the man who runs the largest freight operation between San Francisco and the mining camps, and he's been your most profitable customer for the past 6 months. "We need to talk," Morrison calls out, his voice carrying an edge of desperation you've never heard before. He dismounts and climbs the steps to your platform, his face flushed from hard riding. "Big Jim Patterson's building his own bridge," Morrison says, without preamble, 2 miles downstream, plans to undercut your tolls by half. You nod slowly, having expected this challenge for months. Patterson has been trying to break your various monopolies ever since you outmaneuvered him in the flour speculation. But this time, he's made a strategic error that reveals he doesn't understand the real nature of transportation bottlenecks. Interesting, you say. walking to the edge of the platform where you can see the entire valley spread out below. 2 miles downstream puts his bridge right at Widow's Bend, where the river makes that sharp turn. Morrison frowns. So bridges don't just cross rivers, Charlie. They connect road networks. You point to the winding trail that leads up from the valley floor. Every wagon that crosses Patterson's Bridge will have to navigate an extra 8 miles of switchback trail to reach the main road. In winter, that section becomes impassable. The distant sound of construction drifts up from the valley, hammers, saws, and the shouts of workers building Patterson's Bridge. But you're not worried. You've learned that controlling transportation means understanding not just where things cross, but how they connect to everything else. There's more, Morrison continues. Patterson's signed exclusive contracts with 3 freight companies. They're required to use his bridge once it's completed. This is more concerning. Patterson isn't just building competing infrastructure, he's trying to control the entire supply chain by forcing freight companies to use his routes. But you've been preparing for this possibility. Charlie, how many of your drivers have families living in the camps? Most of them. Why? Because Patterson's Bridge leads to the old mining road, the one that passes right through Hangtown Gulch, where the road agents have been hitting wagons twice a week for the past month. Morrison's face goes pale as he understands the implications. Road agents, highway robbers who prey on freight wagons, have made the old mining road increasingly dangerous. Patterson's cheaper route would expose freight companies to systematic theft. But that's not our real advantage, you continue, pulling out a leather portfolio filled with legal documents. Our real advantage is this. You spread out a map showing property ownership throughout the region. Red marks indicate land you've quietly purchased over the past year, not just the bridge location but strategic parcels throughout the transportation network. Patterson can build his bridge, you explain, but he can't build the roads that connect to it. I own the land on both sides of his bridge approach, and I own the toll rights to the main road that freight wagons need to reach the mining camps. Morrison stares at the map, tracing the red marks with his finger. You've been planning this for months. Strategic positioning isn't about controlling one bottleneck, Charlie. It's about controlling the entire network of bottlenecks. You roll up the map, the sound of paper rustling mixing with the distant noise of wagon traffic. Patterson can charge whatever tolls he wants, but every wagon that crosses his bridge still has to pass through my toll stations to reach their destinations. The splash of ferry crossings drifts up from the river below, where smaller boats carry foot traffic and light cargo. Even that traffic generates revenue through the ferry licenses you hold from the territorial government. How did you know to buy all this land? Morrison asks. Because I learned to read the patterns, you reply. Mining taught me that gold follows predictable geological formations. Politics taught me that power follows predictable relationship patterns, and transportation follows predictable geographical patterns. You gesture toward the mountain passes visible in the distance. There are only 3 ways to cross these mountains with heavy wagons. I control 2 of them completely, and I hold strategic choke points on the 3rd. Patterson's Bridge is impressive, but it's just one link in a chain I already control. Then the bridge collapsed. The sound reaches you first, a tremendous crack like thunder, followed by the splash of timber hitting water and the panicked shouts of workers. You and Morrison run to the edge of the platform, looking downstream toward Patterson's construction site. What happened? Morrison shouts. Through the morning mist, you can see the twisted remains of Patterson's half-built bridge scattered across the riverbank. Workers are pulling themselves out of the water, and someone is riding hard toward town, probably to fetch the doctor. Spring floods, you say quietly. The river's 20 feet higher than normal this time of year. Patterson's engineers calculated the bridge height based on summer water levels. The distant sound of the rescue effort, shouting voices, splashing water, horses galloping, fills the silence as Morrison stares at the wreckage. How did you know? He asks. Because I've been studying this river for 2 years. I know its patterns, its seasonal variations, its flood cycles. Patterson saw an opportunity to build a bridge. I saw a river that destroys bridges built in the wrong locations. The morning sun breaks through the clouds, illuminating the steady stream of wagon traffic crossing your bridge. Each wagon represents not just $5 in tolls, but proof that you've learned the most important lesson about wealth creation. You'd learned that controlling how things moved was more valuable than the things themselves, and the greatest fortunes belonged to those who understood that geography, politics, and commerce were all part of the same system. Infrastructure monopoly wasn't just about building roads and bridges, it was about understanding the invisible networks that connected everything together, and positioning yourself at the points where those networks couldn't function without you. Within 2 years, you're not just buying land, you're designing communities. The sound of your empire building changes from the scratch of quill pens signing purchase agreements to the rhythmic thud of construction crews laying foundations. You can stand on a hill and watch your vision taking shape, streets laid out in patterns that will handle traffic for generations, town squares positioned to become commercial centers, residential areas planned around natural water sources. The surveyor's chain has become your favorite sound. That methodical clanking as your crews measure and mark boundaries represents something more valuable than gold: certainty. In a region where property disputes could drag on for decades, you're creating clear, legally defensible ownership that buyers can trust. But success breeds danger. Other speculators notice your pattern, start competing for the same properties. Eastern investment companies send agents with deeper pockets and fewer scruples. You realize that owning land is only half the battle. Protecting it requires different skills entirely. The confrontation comes on a Tuesday morning, when you arrive at your newest property to find stakes driven into the ground with someone else's name on them. The sound of horses approaching at a gallop tells you this dispute won't be settled in court. You reach for the surveyor's report in your saddlebag, your fingers finding the document that proves your claim. But as you listen to the approaching hoofbeats, you realize something that will change your strategy forever. The richest men aren't those who own the most land. They're those who own the right land at the right time. The sound of conflict becomes the sound of opportunity, because while your competitors are fighting over individual properties, you're already planning something bigger, something that will make land ownership look like a child's game. You're going to control the money itself. But no empire, no matter how carefully built, can stand against the forces of economic chaos when they finally arrive. 5 years have passed since you opened your first bank, 3 since you began your systematic acquisition of California real estate. Your name is now spoken in the same breath as the most powerful men in the state. Your financial network extends from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and your land holdings stretch across valleys that are rapidly filling with the towns and cities you envisioned. Yet all of this prosperity, yours and California's, rests on a foundation more fragile than anyone wants to admit. The silence is what hits you first, not the absence of sound, but the wrong kind of quiet, the dead stillness that fills San Francisco's streets when fear has crushed the normal rhythm of commerce. Your boot heels echo against empty boardwalks as you walk toward your bank, each step sounding like a gunshot in the unnatural calm. The fog rolls in from the harbor, but underneath its familiar salt smell lies something else, the metallic scent of panic. It started with a rumor. That's how these things always begin. A whisper in a saloon, a conversation overheard at the docks, a newspaper headline that turns possibility into certainty. Eastern banks are calling in their loans. The gold is running out. California's boom is over. By the time the truth catches up with the lies, the damage is done. You pause at the corner of Montgomery Street, listening to sounds that tell the real story. The desperate scratching of quill pens as men try to liquidate assets. The hollow thud of auctioneers' gavels falling on dreams sold for pennies. The creak of wagon wheels as families pack everything they own, preparing to flee back east before their luck runs out completely. This is what a financial panic sounds like. Not the crash of thunder, but the slow suffocation of confidence. The panic of 1855 didn't arrive overnight. It built like a storm system, feeding on itself until it became unstoppable. Eastern investors, nervous about California's distance and political instability, began demanding immediate returns on their investments. Mining companies, over-leveraged on claims that were producing less gold than promised, couldn't meet their obligations. Banks, caught between depositors demanding withdrawals and borrowers unable to repay, began calling in loans at the worst possible moment. The domino effect was inevitable. Mining operations shut down, throwing thousands out of work. Merchants couldn't collect on debts, forcing them to close shops. Property values collapsed as desperate sellers flooded the market. The entire economic ecosystem that had sustained California's growth began devouring itself. Then came the news that would change everything. You're sitting in your bank's main office when your assistant bursts through the door, his face white with terror. The merchant's bank, he gasps, struggling to catch his breath. They've closed their doors. Permanently. The merchant's bank, your biggest competitor, the institution that served half of San Francisco's commercial district. As if it failed, the panic will spread like wildfire through every business in the city. You can already hear it starting, the distant sound of running feet as word spreads, the rising voices of crowds gathering outside other banks, the beginning of what could become a complete financial collapse. But in that moment of chaos, you hear something else, something that makes you smile despite the crisis swirling around you, the sound of opportunity knocking. While other bankers are boarding up their windows and fleeing the city, you're walking through the streets with a leather satchel full of gold coins. The weight of it pulls at your shoulder, but it's a comfortable weight, the weight of preparation meeting opportunity. You've spent the last 6 months preparing for this moment, not predicting it exactly, but understanding that booms always end in busts, that over-leveraged prosperity always collapses under its own weight. While your competitors were making risky loans and chasing quick profits, you were building reserves, maintaining liquidity, keeping enough cash on hand to survive a crisis. The sound of your boots on the merchant's bank steps echoes with finality. Inside, the former president sits behind his desk, his head in his hands. The silence is broken only by the tick of a clock that's counting down to bankruptcy. "I'll take it all," you tell him. "The building, the remaining assets, the customer accounts, cash transaction." His head snaps up, eyes wide with disbelief. "You can't be serious. The liabilities alone are exactly what I want," you interrupt. "Every failed loan, every defaulted mortgage, every piece of property your bank was forced to seize. I'm buying the distress, not avoiding it." This is the secret of crisis management. When everyone else is selling, the smart money is buying. When panic drives prices below their real value, patient capital can acquire assets that will be worth fortunes when confidence returns. The key is having the resources to wait out the storm and the vision to see beyond the immediate chaos. Within 3 months, you own half the commercial real estate in San Francisco, not through aggressive speculation, but through careful acquisition of distressed properties. The sound of your empire expanding changes from the crash of failing businesses to the steady rhythm of renovation and reconstruction. The desperate voices of ruined men become the grateful conversations of new tenants. The auctioneer's gavels now fall in your favor, selling assets you're acquiring at fractions of their true value. The silence of empty streets gives way to the purposeful sounds of commerce resuming under new management. You're not just surviving the panic, you're using it as a tool for consolidation. Every failed competitor becomes an acquisition opportunity. Every distressed property becomes part of your growing portfolio. Every desperate seller becomes a source of assets at below market prices. The psychological shift is as important as the financial one. While other businessmen are paralyzed by fear, you're energized by possibility. While they're cutting back and conserving, you're expanding and investing. Your confidence becomes contagious, attracting customers and partners who recognize strength in the midst of chaos. By the time the panic subsides, you've learned something that will guide every future decision. The richest men aren't those who avoid crises, but those who have cash when everyone else is desperate. Liquidity during a panic is worth more than gold during a boom. The sound of San Francisco returning to life, the resumption of normal commerce, the conversations of renewed confidence, the rhythm of a city rebuilding itself, is the sound of your greatest victory. You've not just survived the crisis, you've used it to establish yourself as California's most powerful businessman. But as you stand in your expanded office, listening to the familiar sounds of prosperity returning, you realize something that will shape your final strategy. True wealth isn't just about surviving individual crises. It's about creating systems so robust they can weather any storm. The sound of your next chapter is already beginning, the integrated empire that will make you truly untouchable. You hear the rhythmic clang of pickaxes echoing from your minds, but now it's music to your ears, not the desperate scraping of a man searching for gold, but the steady percussion of an empire at work. The sound mingles with the splash of paddle wheels on your river steamers, the crack of whips from your freight wagons, and the quiet scratch of quill pens in your bank. Each sound represents money flowing into your coffers, even as you sleep. But this morning, something feels different. The familiar sounds seem disconnected, like musicians playing different songs in the same orchestra. The years have been kind to you. What started as a desperate search for gold has transformed into something far more sophisticated. A network of businesses that spans from the Sierra Nevada mountains to the bustling port of San Francisco. Yet, as you stand in your San Francisco office, this particular morning, watching the controlled chaos of your various enterprises through tall windows, something troubling becomes clear. Your mining operations produce gold. Your transportation network moves it. Your bank stores it. Your real estate holdings appreciate with every new arrival. Each business is profitable, but you're beginning to see the cracks between them, dangerous fissures where money and opportunity leak away. The ledger books tell the story your ears suspected. Your freight wagons carry competitors' goods because your mines can't fill them. Your bank lends money to rivals who undercut your supply businesses. Your real estate sits empty because your transportation routes don't connect to the best plots. You're rich, but you're not efficient, and inefficiency, you've learned, is where fortunes leak away. The challenge becomes clear when you hear two conversations on the same day. First, in your bank, a customer complains about the cost of shipping gold dust to Sacramento. Robbery, he mutters, counting out coins. 3 different companies, 3 different fees, no one talking to each other. Later, at your freight office, you overhear your own manager. We're running half-empty wagons to the mines because the bank won't extend credit to smaller operators. Makes no sense. We could fill every seat if they had cash to pay. The problem isn't individual businesses. It's the spaces between them, the gaps where money and opportunity fall through the cracks. Over the following months, you begin to see your empire not as separate businesses, but as a single organism, like a body where the heart pumps blood to feed the muscles that move the bones that carry the brain that directs the heart, each part stronger because it serves the whole. The integration starts small. You offer your freight customers immediate credit through your bank, interest-free if they're shipping your gold. Suddenly, your wagons run full, your mines have guaranteed transport, and your bank has reliable borrowers. You hear the change in the sounds around you. The rhythm becomes synchronized. The clang of pickaxes now matches the departure schedule of your steamers. The scratch of bank pens aligns with the arrival of your freight wagons. Your real estate sales spike because you offer financing, transportation, and guaranteed mineral surveys from your mining expertise. What you've created is something new, something your competitors can't match because they're still thinking in pieces. You're thinking in systems. When a customer needs to move gold from their claim to San Francisco, you don't just offer one service. You offer the complete solution: mining equipment from your supply business, transport on your wagons, storage in your bank, and investment in your real estate, all at rates that undercut the competition, because you're not trying to maximize profit from each transaction. You're maximizing profit from the entire system. The sounds of your empire have become a symphony, each note perfectly timed, each instrument contributing to a harmony that competitors can't recreate. Your daily revenues have tripled, not from working harder but from working smarter, from seeing the connections others miss. But as you listen to this magnificent orchestration of wealth creation, you realize something profound. The machine you've built makes money while you sleep, but it doesn't make meaning. You've mastered the art of creating systems that generate wealth automatically. Now you face a different challenge: what to do with wealth that exceeds any personal need. The question that will define your final chapters isn't how to make more money, it's how to make that money matter. Years pass, and the weight of your success begins to settle on your shoulders in ways you never expected. You find yourself standing in what used to be an empty lot, but now you hear something that makes your throat tighten with unexpected emotion. Children's laughter, clear, bright, untainted by the hard realities of frontier life. They're playing in the courtyard of the school you built, the first real school in a mining town that previously taught children nothing but how to survive. The sound carries more weight than all the gold you've ever lifted, because you're hearing something that will outlast you. Your wealth has reached a point where the numbers have lost meaning. $50 million, more than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. But with that wealth comes a responsibility that keeps you awake at night. You've seen what happens to great fortunes when they're not wisely stewarded. They corrupt descendants, fuel family feuds, or simply dissolve into wasteful extravagance. You want something different. You want to create something permanent. The challenge reveals itself during a fever epidemic that sweeps through the mining camps. You watch men die, not from lack of medicine, but from lack of knowledge. Women give birth without trained help. Children grow up illiterate, their potential buried as surely as gold in untouched ground. Your money could help, but throwing cash at problems is like throwing gold into a river. It disappears without creating lasting change. The real challenge isn't spending money. It's building systems that continue to create value long after you're gone. You need to think like an architect of institutions, not just a dispenser of charity. Drawing on the same systematic thinking that built your business empire, You approach the challenge of social impact with methodical precision. Instead of just funding a school, you create a teacher training program. Instead of just building a hospital, you establish a medical college. Instead of just providing charity, you create institutions that generate their own resources. The sounds around you change again. Now you hear the measured cadence of lectures in your sponsored colleges, the quiet concentration of students in your libraries, the grateful murmur of patients in your hospitals. But more importantly, you hear the multiplication effect, your original investments creating new teachers, new doctors, new opportunities that spread far beyond what your money alone could touch. You learn that true philanthropy isn't about giving money away, it's about creating systems that continue to give long after the original gift is forgotten. Your schools train teachers who build more schools, your hospitals train doctors who serve communities you'll never visit. Your libraries preserve knowledge that will educate generations not yet born. The sounds of your legacy institutions have become the background music of California's development. From mining camps to San Francisco, you hear the steady rhythm of education, healthcare, and opportunity, all flowing from systems you designed to outlast your lifetime. But as you listen to children reciting lessons in schools you built, you realize you've learned something more valuable than any business skill. You've learned that the greatest fortunes aren't measured in what you accumulate, but in what you create that continues to grow after you're gone. Now, as you enter your final years, you face one last question. What does it all mean? The passage of time has a way of bringing clarity to even the most complex questions. You're sitting in your study now, surrounded by the quiet rustle of papers, documenting a lifetime of achievement. Outside your window, San Francisco bustles with activity, ships in the harbor, construction hammers echoing off buildings, the distant sound of the cable cars you helped finance. Your transformation from desperate prospector to California's richest man is complete. But in this moment of quiet reflection, you hear something that makes you smile. It's the sound of your own breathing, steady, healthy content. You're alive to see what you've built, and what you've built is more than you ever imagined possible. You think back to that first day in the mountains, when you had $20 in your pocket and hunger gnawing at your belly. The man who knelt by that stream, desperately sifting through gravel for flakes of gold, couldn't have imagined this moment. Not just the wealth, though $50 million is beyond anything he could have dreamed, but the understanding. You've learned that wealth isn't really about money. It's about capability, the ability to solve problems, create opportunities, and build systems that make life better for others, while securing your own prosperity. Each skill you mastered wasn't just about getting rich, it was about becoming more capable. Reading the land taught you pattern recognition. Surviving frontier justice taught you psychology. Building infrastructure taught you systems thinking. Creating financial networks taught you the power of connections. The real treasure wasn't the gold you found, but the person you became in the process of finding it. The final skill you've mastered is wisdom, the ability to see the complete picture of what you've accomplished and why it matters. You've learned that true wealth comes in layers, like sediment in a riverbed. The first layer is survival, having enough to meet your basic needs. The second is security, having enough to weather storms. The third is freedom, having enough to choose how you spend your time. The fourth is impact, having enough to change things for the better. But there's a fifth layer that most people never reach: understanding. The knowledge that wealth is not a destination but a tool, a means of creating value, not just accumulating it. You've become wealthy, not by taking from others, but by creating systems that made everyone more prosperous. Your mines created jobs, your transportation networks connected communities, your banks provided credit for other entrepreneurs, your schools and hospitals improved countless lives. As you sit in the twilight of your success, you understand the real secret that eluded so many other fortune seekers. Wealth isn't about having more than others. It's about having the ability to create more for everyone. From $20 to $50 million, from desperate prospector to California's most powerful businessman, from survivor to builder of institutions that will outlast you by generations. The numbers tell one story, but the real story is in the sounds that surround you now. The hum of prosperity, the rhythm of opportunity, the harmony of systems working together to create value for everyone they touch. The greatest fortune isn't what you've gained for yourself, it's what you've made possible for others, and that, you realize, is a treasure that can never be lost, stolen, or depleted. That's the real secret of becoming the richest person alive, understanding that true wealth is measured not in what you accumulate, but in what you create, that continues to grow long after you're gone. He'd learned that the richest person alive isn't the one who has the most money, it's the one who has created the most value for others while securing their own prosperity. And that lesson, more than any gold, is the real treasure of the California gold rush. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for listening. I hope to see you in another one.